This is BayRadio.
KL settle then from The Greatest Showman, of course. BayRadio at 10 past 10 in mainland Spain, 10 past 9 UK and Canaries. We're here for Thursday morning, and nothing better than a big high-kicking show tune to introduce our next guest. Jon Gaunt's back on this show again after last week as well. Should be able to hear me. Good morning.
Good morning. It's very early, my friend. I'm looking forward to getting back with Cal in the afternoons. No disrespect to you.
No, that's because I was going to mention that how different is it for you not having had most of the day to get wound up about the daily news stories? Your first thing in the morning here.
I think, like most people around the world, you don't have to have a warm-up to get wound up at the moment. This COVID thing is affecting everybody and everything. So I think we're all preoccupied with it, and things are just getting worse at the moment. And the thing is, the danger is people are retreating to their bunkers. We saw it in Parliament the other day. It's basically tribal warfare, isn't it? And no one wants to listen to the other side's opinion. And if I'm honest, myself, I've got caught up in that. When we had the debate the other day with Boris, it was just MP after MP trying to make a name for themselves, and undoubtedly Keir Starmer now is being an opportunist trying to stitch up Boris over the lockdown, but he's not even proposing a proper lockdown, if we're being honest, this sort of circuit break. And also, I'm very worried now that the union itself, Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland and England, it's not going to exist after this pandemic because everybody's going their own way. And in the end, the responsibility for that has to lie with Boris. He should have involved Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford and Arlene. He should have said, come on, Arlene, let's talk. Let's have a united front on this. And we haven't got a united front. We haven't got clarity either. So nobody understands the rules. Let's be absolutely blunt about this. Just watching GMTV, they had about 8 guests on at one time, and nobody knows where, if you come from a highly infected area, but you go to another area because you're tier 2 and you can still travel, can you then do X, Y, and Z? No one knows.
No.
Which is why I'm putting forward, and I've got pelters for it yesterday. Day before yesterday, I did my Sputnik column, and I said, give us a full lockdown. Now, before you give me pelters, let me explain why. And I'd love to know what BayRadio listeners think as well. Effectively, I think we need a full lockdown. I don't think we had a full lockdown last time. Boris was too late to introduce it. He'd already had the Cheltenham Festival, for example. He was still anti-masks at that time. I think now we need a full lockdown. It needs to be limited, maybe for 2 or 3 weeks, minimum of 2 weeks. Do it over October break. And here's the controversial bit. Every student now should be told to isolate. They should isolate for 10 days. They should be tested now, and priority should be given to them, then tested again. Then the government should move them in coaches with masks on back to their home, and they won't be going back to university until after Christmas. They should do all the lectures on Zoom, which is what they're doing anyway. They should have compensation for their fees and also for their halls of residence fees as well. And here's the next bit. All schools should be closed immediately. They're going to have the half-term holiday anyway. Let's close them. If you saw the press conference with Boris, it was clear it's young people, students and kids who are spreading it. Now, the problem is they don't show the symptoms so much and they don't get that ill, but they come back like even in our house where we've got Nana, multi-generational living, so to speak. And that's how it's spreading. We have to be draconian. And President Macron of France, as you probably know, overnight has introduced a curfew in Paris and in 12 other cities. You can't go out. Even go out after 9 o'clock till 6 in the morning, a bit like Spain had, a bit like the Canaries had, and I think Italy was like this in the first one. Now, and people keep saying to me, yeah, but lockdowns don't work. Well, no, that lockdown before did work in so much as it suppressed the bulge and it gave the NHS time. Clearly, what we need to do is have more time for this track and trace thing to work, because Hancock has messed that up. We'll go on to that in a moment. So I think the only answer is a full lockdown. We can't have a situation where Northern Ireland is having a 4-week lockdown, a situation where the people of Liverpool, putting aside the students who are dancing in the street, they're not to blame, are they, as individual people? We must compensate the businesses and compensate people, extend the furlough. And yes, it's going to cost lots of money. And for saying that, I am getting pelters. Interestingly, much more aggressive on Twitter. The Twitter people seem to think it's all a conspiracy and what we need to do is just let people die, have herd immunity. Whereas Facebook, it seems to be more considered or more on my side. But it gets to a point, as I've said right at the beginning here, where you're in an entrenched position and nobody is really talking it through. And in the end, it's all down to Boris and his government because they have not shown clarity or leadership. He needs to say now, this is what we're doing, this is it, that's the end of it. He stood up the other day and said, no, I don't want to go to a full lockdown, but everything is still on the table. You can't play with this as if it's Brexit. I mean, I'm a passionate Brexiteer, but we have to get out of our tribal bunkers and talk and do the best for the country. I don't know what you think, and I don't know what's happening in Spain, but that's how I'm seeing it, guys.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really blame the devolved governments for maybe doing their own thing because they're not getting anything concrete from central government there.
Well, yes, and also their first responsibility, if you're Eileen in Northern Ireland, is the safety of their citizens. That's the duty of government. Boris, please tell me if I'm wrong. I don't mind having some pelters off the listeners today on this. I've got used to it the last day or so. But they've got to protect their citizens. They think this is the best way. But you've now got a situation where Liverpool's gone into this, but now Manchester, Andy Burnham, breaking news this morning, he's threatening to sue the government. Now, Andy Burnham, Labour politician, Mayor of Manchester, I think he's making a pretty good job of that. So I'm not necessarily in his political camp, but I can understand why he doesn't want it imposed from above. And the other thing I can understand, and loads of people are going, oh, Gaunty, you've gone all left wing, you've become a snowflake. Because I'm saying you can't take away people's livelihoods and close down businesses like gyms and clubs and restaurants and pubs if you don't extend the furlough. I mean, Rishi is a multi-millionaire, the Chancellor, and he's telling people now to take 2/3 of their cash. They won't be able to live on that. If you're on the minimum wage, so you're just under a tenner, you're only going to have about £5.60 an hour to live on. Well, people have got their rent to pay. Christmas is coming up. So if you're going to be draconian, which is what I'm saying, and do it across the country, you've got to accept that's an awful lot of money. And then people say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, how are we going to pay for all the hospital admissions, which are going through the roof, not all across the country, but in large areas of the country? Or how are you going to pay for the deaths? You've got to make a choice. And all I'm trying to say is that Boris should now make the choice. The choice I want him to make is full lockdown, whatever they call it, circuit break for a few weeks. Now, I know there's a danger that that'll extend into December, into Christmas. But if you look at the experts at the moment, they are saying that this could go on to July under the present circumstances. And I don't think that's acceptable. And also, Boris promised us, and so did Matt Hancock, that they were following the science. 3 weeks ago, his top scientific advisors told him to go to a full circuit breaker lockdown and get kids out of school and get the... I think we all agreed, we talked about this last week, didn't we? There's no way the students should have ever gone back. I just think sometimes, you've got to put your hands up and you've got to show leadership. And for that, loads of people are getting on my back because I'm saying really what Boris should be saying. But it's very important. When I say a full lockdown, I do mean compensation. I don't think that has been right. I do mean extending the furlough. And I do know that that's going to be hard for a lot of people, myself included, but we've all got to do our bit. And clearly, we've not been doing our bit. But at the moment, there's a PR campaign to try and put all the blame onto the British people. You know, those idiots who danced in the streets in Liverpool, I don't know if you saw that the other night. I mean, they were totally irresponsible. But look at yourself in the mirror and say, have I been responsible?
But where does it end, though, John, with the lockdown? I mean, is it you saying it's the right time now and don't leave it any longer? Because while we're still struggling, nothing's got back to how it was. Now would be the time.
That's a very good question. What I'm saying is, it was the right time 3 weeks ago, according to the scientists. Time is running out. 137 deaths yesterday. the admissions are going through the roof. Liverpool has no more intensive care beds for COVID. Other cities are in a similar way. London's going to be put probably into tier 2 or 3. Manchester is definitely going to today. And I'm saying the local politicians on the ground are saying, look, we want to be involved in this. And Boris, and this goes above politics. I'm a Conservative, generally speaking. I'm right of centre. But I just think he's made a complete cock-up of this. But we need to pull back and we need to have this. So your question, how long will it go on for? Well, hopefully 2 or 3 weeks. Don't send the students back till well after Christmas. I'm sorry, the little kids, get them out of schools. Many schools are closed anyway, or half closed, because they've had an outbreak. This is really serious now. Really serious. And I know still some people say, oh, it doesn't exist, it's a hoax, it's this. And, other people say, what about the Chinese? Well, look, hands up. The Chinese are responsible for a cover-up. They didn't act quickly enough. Whether it came from the wet markets or whether it came from a lab, I don't know. But we'll have to address that later. What we have to do now is look at the clear and present danger this country is in. And for people just to repeat and repeat, oh, it's all a hoax. It's clearly not a hoax.
No.
People are dying.
My response to that is, so it's a big conspiracy, big hoax, but they managed to get every government, left and right, across the world to go along with it. Do you know how many people that involves in keeping their mouth shut? It's not a thing. It's easily explained. But Josh is here, by the way. Back up.
Josh. Just go back to your point as well. It would also mean ordinary nurses are lying, wouldn't it? If for that conspiracy theory to hold water. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's happening. What's happening in Spain at the moment about it, Josh?
Yeah, well, one point I think is interesting here to compare the two countries is you were saying in the UK that you John, are asking for a full lockdown, and I think here what's really interesting,
lockdown for 2 or 3 weeks. But when I say a full lockdown, I mean a full lockdown. Nothing open. Only the essential shop.
I understood. I mean, I think it's interesting because Spain probably geographically, obviously, is a very different country, having major islands like the Canaries, and what we're seeing here is that the government is actually really opposed to a full lockdown, and this has been playing out a lot in Madrid because the regional governments were devolved powers, and they implemented their own lockdown, and then the government stepped in for a bit of time, and now they've come out again. But Spain it seems to show that really localized lockdowns where you keep people into certain municipalities seems to be working well, because Madrid's accumulated incidence dropped from, it was in the 700s and now it's down to the 200s in just a couple of weeks. So we're seeing that that's working. I mean, do you think that could work in the UK too?
No. No, because you're right, they're different countries. Madrid was really your hotspot, wasn't it, for Corona, to be honest with you. Our problem in this country, it's a smaller country. You've got the boss of Wales saying he won't let the English in. They're putting border controls in. You've got Northern Ireland. I know the water separates us, but you've got Northern Ireland saying it is a full lockdown, all universities, all schools closed, etc., etc. And in Scotland, of course, it's got to be said that Nicola Sturgeon has led from the front. No, we're a united kingdom. We're stronger being united. I think it's an international one. I know it's a bit unfair, like, say, for example, for people in Cornwall, where it's very low level, but we should be all in this together. That was the mantra. I know we haven't been, and I know our politicians have let us down. So I'm the first to accept that. I'm not pushing a party political point at all here, because on one level I'm agreeing with the Labour Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham. I just think Britain now needs to have it. And it isn't just the UK. I mean, if you look at across Europe, Italy, infections are surging once again. Wednesday, a record 7,332 cases. It's the worst day back from March. Their cases per 100,000 residents have doubled in the last 2 weeks to nearly 87. Death figures hovering at the moment about 40. So it's not happening. They're now putting a midnight curfew in. Germany, which is often held up as a great example, Josh, more than 5,000 new daily cases. This is Europe-wide. Europe-wide. They're saying they're not ruling out a national lockdown. France, as I was telling you a moment ago, Macron has put a state of emergency in place. Means people cannot go to restaurants or visit friends. There's no restrictions yet on public transport on travel between the regions, but at 9 o'clock you've got to be at home till 6 o'clock in the morning. Now then, you talk about Spain. Let's look at the latest facts on Spain. Spain is the first European country to pass 900,000 cases on Wednesday. This is from Sky News. Hospitalisations are on the increase too. The number of severe cases remains far lower than during the first wave, so that's good news. But in Catalonia, the authorities have ordered bars and restaurants to close, like you were saying, for 15 days and limited the numbers of people allowed in shops. Now, Spain is such a massive landmass, you can do more of that local thing, I think. Britain isn't. That would be my point, Josh. Over to you. What do you think?
By the way, can I just jump in, John, and give the number out, because we want everyone to take part, obviously. 684 455 844. We've started big and talking about potential lockdown in the UK, so let us know your thoughts. 684 455 844. Our friend Stephen Burke is through on WhatsApp, who's in with Cal every week, of course. Just suggesting that obviously the UK population didn't really obey the rules. This may apply elsewhere as well, but the police admitting they're having trouble enforcing it anyway. Overstretched and what have you. There's no will to obey the rules.
The police are having trouble enforcing it. Don't forget, Theresa May cut 20,000 police jobs, and those jobs haven't come back yet, even though Boris promised it. It's not his fault. It takes time, obviously, for police officers. I think, Stephen, you've just got to be a little bit careful. I think there's a narrative now coming out of politicians. I'm particularly talking about the UK. Josh will tell us about Spain, but there's a narrative. I call it, how do I say it politely, bottom covering by the politicians. They know there's an inquiry coming down the road, right? A massive public inquiry into why Boris allowed Cheltenham to go ahead, why Boris actually got COVID-19 because he wasn't wearing masks and he was shaking people's hands, etc., etc. Why we didn't have the right PPE in place at the beginning, why that first wave, it took so long to actually put the lockdown in. All of those questions are going to be asked. So they want to have a bit of bottom covering now. And so to put the blame onto ordinary people, the little people, don't forget, it wasn't just the little people who broke the rules. What about Dominic Cummings and his eye test? What about Margaret Ferrier, or whatever her name is, the SNP woman, MP, who still hasn't resigned? No. So although I see the sentiment, it's obviously important, Stephen, that we all take personal responsibility, if we understand the rules. I understand that. The people in Liverpool were out of order. But be careful of this establishment narrative that is trying to push the blame onto ordinary people. If there'd been a proper national lockdown at the beginning with proper rules, which you had more proper rules in Spain, to be honest, especially in the Canaries, I know, because I spoke to my friend who lives there, Paul Ruan, and he said it was really harsh. Even if you went to the supermarket, they checked that you'd been to the supermarket. You couldn't go as a couple, etc., etc. We didn't have that in the UK. So that's what I'm saying. Be careful of allowing the establishment to blame us, the people. Are they trying to do that at all in Spain, Josh? What do you think?
I think, you do hit on a really interesting point, and I was working on a story back at when the Dominic Cummings sort of, I suppose you could call it a scandal broke, and I compared the fines. Right, that had happened during the lockdowns in both Spain and the UK. And at that time, Spain had just hit 1 million people fined due to COVID restrictions. Guess how many UK fines were issued at the same time up to that date? 1,700.
Yeah.
And I think we can really see this. In Spain, there's been no narrative about, ordinary people being to blame. It's always been the government to blame, because I think what we can see here in Spain, it's been much more authoritarian with the lockdowns. And like you're saying, I did a bunch of stories about a man was fined for going to the shop to buy Nutella because he didn't have a receipt, And someone else was fined for having a hard loaf of bread.
This is also about political history, isn't it? Spain has got a different political history to Britain, if we talk about the Franco era, and so therefore maybe people are more compliant. I don't know. But what I do know is that, there's a big story at the moment about Liverpool. A guy refused to close his gym. He said, well, it's COVID safe, I'm keeping it open. So then the police turned up mob-handed. I think there were 6 police officers. Some of the newspapers are saying they were armed. I could see a taser or two, but they weren't. Their arms weren't out, and they fined the guy. They warned him. Then they fined him £1,000, and if he opens again today, it'll be £2,000. Now,
Here it's 60 grand. It's 60 grand bars are getting fined here. Bam, no questions asked.
Josh, listen to the story because this is important. I just feel that he's in the wrong. If the rule is the rule that gyms have to close, even if I disagree with it, this will never work. No man is an island. We have to obey those rules, even when they're stupid. We have to obey it. And so the gym guy, I've got a lot of sympathy for him, but going on telly saying, I'm going to stay open, right? I'm afraid he's going to get the full weight of the law on him. And again, this is the problem, because he's looking at his gym, he's having to close it, he's not getting any proper compensation for closing it, he can't furlough his staff anymore after the end of this month. His business is going to be ruined. So that is why it's got to be a package. You can't just close down people's businesses and not do that.
But what happens to the other side of lockdown, John? Because we had it, it contained things, and then people are free again, and they just go about their business, and the numbers rise once again. So it's kind of where does that end? Keeping things in place.
Well, where it ends is a proper draconian lockdown. I'm going to tell you something else which might upset you.
You want this to happen, eh?
At the end of it, it's personal responsibility.
Yeah, but who does that? You can't trust people. They don't abide by the rules, especially younger folk. I know you're saying younger folk are getting the blame, but they don't.
No. You have to stop thinking in a negative way.
I'm not. I'm saying how it is. I think I've seen it out and about. People, especially after a few refreshing drinks, they all relax.
What you have to do as a society, I'm not talking about you as one person, I'm talking about as a society, the government has to get over the idea that we are in it together, we are working at it now, we're having a lockdown. After the lockdown, you have to take personal responsibility, because it could be, as Matt Hancock famously said, and I have no time for him either, it could be your granny next, or your mum, or your dad. So there is personal responsibility. Ordinary people have to play their part. But what's happening at the moment is, in Britain, they're trying to blame all the little people for it. And that is why, if you think I've been controversial so far, I want to go further. I actually want the military on the street. I want a proper curfew enforced by the military, like they're having in Paris and in 12 other major cities. We should be closing down at 9 o'clock at night. Bars shouldn't be open anyway, and people should be in their homes. Let's get on top of it. Let's have a bit of pain for major gain. But you're so right. I agree with you when you were just arguing with me that, you've seen it with your own eyes. But I also ask you to look in the mirror. Have you abided by all the rules? Because do you know what? I don't think I have. And then, I'm thinking about Christmas. I want to have my kids here. They've got boyfriends. I can easily go past the rule of 6 by 1 or 2. Am I going to do that? Well, yesterday I sat down with my wife and she said, no, we're not. Because how can you slag off other people, John, if you're going to break the rules? So if that means I can't see one of my daughters or Lisa's mum, I think we'll choose Lisa's mum, to be honest, then so be it.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd say the way it is, because I don't know about you two guys. I don't want to die of this. I don't want anybody in my family to die of it. Now, maybe I'm being alarmist. Feel free, BayRadio listeners, to tell me if you think that's what I'm being. But I say get the military on the street, get the kids out of school, get the kids back from university, and have a proper joined-up thinking about it.
But I think what has come about in the news this morning is that some of the small gatherings, family gatherings, are to blame for the spread. Yes. And obviously that's inside the home, so they're not going to... come and knock it. They're not going to keep an eye on everybody as far as that's concerned. So that comes down to personal responsibility.
You're missing the point. I'm like you. I said to Lisa, well, we have 7 people for Christmas dinner. Who's going to know, right? Which is fair. But then you have to take another philosophical standpoint and say, well, if I break the rules, and then next door are breaking the rules, and everybody's breaking the rules, and if it is as contagious as they say, and it does spread within homes, multi-generational homes, then I'm partly to blame for the problem. So you have to say to yourself, I must go with the rules. But the rules need to be clear, which is why it's ridiculous. I live in Warwick. You know Warwick. We're surrounded. Well. Coventry now is going to go into Tier 2. Birmingham's already there, isn't it? They'll both be in Tier 3. Where your mum lives and where I live, we're in this little oasis, right? Yeah. But would you feel safe if I said to you, I said, I tell you what, I'll go and get your mum and I'll take her out for a meal in a pub in Warwick, which could be full of brummies. because that's what's going to happen. Because there's a different rule in Warwick. People will, you know this anyway. In Warwick and Stratford, in fact, in Stratford, it's going up again now. In Warwick and Stratford and Leamington, there's a lot of people who come from Birmingham and the Black Country. A lot of living there, but there's a lot of people who come in for the social side because we've got lovely restaurants and beautiful buildings, etc., etc. So, would you feel safe for your mum to go out? Do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
Absolutely. I mean, it's affected me going to see her. That comes down to sort of a bit of personal responsibility as well. But I don't know if everyone's playing along. I'll tell you what we'll do, John. I just need to take a quick break. What I'll do during that is send you, because it's quite a long message from Cameron, who makes some good points in there.
Keep your things coming in. Let's read out that one you've just sent to me from Cameron, if you don't mind.
There's plenty there,
Josh, I want to talk to you about university and younger people. I mean, I know you're not that young, but you're younger than me. And Moody.
A little younger than me.
Morning. I agree with what is being said so far. However, we also have to remember a virus bug this big hasn't been seen in Europe since the Spanish flu. Brilliant point. No government has ever had to tackle this. Good point. The WHO have come out and said lockdowns don't work. However, I think it's good to isolate places where cases are high. However, if they've been able to travel out of Tier 3 areas, as law isn't clear, it'll continue to spread further. Yeah, I also wouldn't put much faith in WHO. WHO were definitely involved in the cover-up with China about, when it first broke out. WHO should have been in there saying more, and so should the Chinese. I'm not saying the Chinese are to blame for it, but I'm saying we should have done it. Likewise, though, we should have reacted quicker. We should have reacted in the West as quick as North Korea, and our leaders, including Trump, let us down on that level. Anyway, carry on. So Cameron then says, a lot of people are saying that we should now follow Sweden. You're correct. People don't seem to realise that their country has a population of 9 million and spread out. Our country is about 56 million people, this is the UK, and all on top of each other. Yes, and the facts bear that out, Cameron, that the most spreads are in multi-generational homes in deprived areas, primarily, where people are living much closer together. It's like any contagious disease. It's like TB. How do we eradicate TB in this country? Well, it was about getting rid of poverty and getting rid of crowded, unsanitary housing. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. We can't afford to be open like Sweden, he says. Boris has called on British people to use their common sense. Unfortunately, that is not so common anymore, especially from university students based on recent footage from the likes of Coventry University and Liverpool. Yeah, well, that's also part of our snowflake society, in my opinion, Cameron. People don't know how to be responsible. They want to be spoon-fed everything. And I think that's wrong. As for Nicola Sturgeon, she wants an independent Scotland. Do you think, based on her behaviour early on during the pandemic, she'd be willing to work with our government? Sorry for the long message, Cameron. Cameron, I don't mind long messages when they're as well thought out as that. I think that's a brilliant message. Don't agree with everything, but that is the whole point.
Where do you stand on the Sweden thing? Because I don't. It hasn't gone as well as people think and believe. They've grabbed hold of this Sweden as the example, but the rate of deaths was a lot higher. And as he says, it's a much smaller population, and they don't go for a drink after work with each other. It's the way that they go about their daily life is totally different. So it's not necessarily.
Yeah, the Swedish have I've been to Sweden quite a few times. They have a completely different attitude to life, a completely different attitude to socialising. They have a drink problem, like many Scandinavian countries, with their hard liquor. I think, I don't think you can draw the comparison. And also, secondly, people don't like me saying this, we've already gone down one route. We can't now totally U-turn and go down the Swedish route. And also, what does it mean? What it actually means is you're condemning some people to die. And then people say, oh, yeah, but the average age is 82, 83, whatever they want to come out with. It's still somebody's life. It's still, your mum or your dad's life, if you follow where I'm coming from. And I think that's just callous. And I think the herd immunity just will not work. That would only work on a national basis as well. So that's what I think. And I think young people are getting blamed. Like Cameron there put the boot into university students. Josh, you're younger than us. What do you think?
Yeah, well, again, we spoke last week, John, about Valencia, because they're the biggest outbreak that was registered in the entire Valencian community from the beginning of the pandemic. Where did it happen? A university, a college hall. Some students ran a rooftop party that got shared on social media, which looked all right if it wasn't for the fact that it was during a pandemic. And again, Granada now has risen. In Spain, the autonomous governments basically set a benchmark of 500 cases per 100,000 inhabitants over the last 14 days. as a benchmark for introducing strict lockdown restrictions. Granada has just hit the 600s, the capital down there, the southern Andalusian city. And why, again, universities are to blame. And we've discussed this a bit. Something that really annoys me is that, you can see this coming. Why would you put all of these kids into university to just 1 month later say, oh, no, it's all going online? I mean, I think that we've got to be thinking a lot smarter, and especially in university, which is supposed to be the brightest minds in the future. It's a great opportunity to teach, young children about the modern world, which is very much digital, and to teach them about working remotely and how to enjoy that and how to do good stuff in the world there.
So therefore, Josh, are you in favour of closing the universities, sending the kids back home, all lectures on Zoom? Would you be in favour of that?
I am, but I mean, I think, it's just the wrong way to talk about it because, what's happened here is, imagine all of those thousands of kids. And you said earlier, right, imagine rent payments. You've gone into a collegiate hall, which is a really exciting time as well. Yeah. And you're going to have to work remotely from there. I mean, you said earlier, where's the compensation for those students? I totally agree with you on that.
They're under house arrest. And also, if I was 18, I'd just left home. I mean, I had a different sort of background. But if I was a normal kid, gone to university, 18, first experience of living away, and then I'm left in my hall and having to stay inside with people I didn't really know for 3 weeks, I think that is psychologically damaging as well, personally. So I think that needs to be looked at. Let me just tell you some breaking news. Daily Mail front page on their internet site now. Mayors, and this is one of the problems with this whole debate. Listen to the way this is written. This is just the headline. Mayors hold Boris to ransom. London's Sadiq Khan and Manchester's Andy Burnham demand more cash as cities face going into tier 2 and 3 today. The whole way that's written is from obviously a right-wing perspective because it's the Daily Mail. They're still well, they were slagging Boris 2 days off, but it looks like they're supporting him now. I don't think, and I don't like Sadiq Khan. I think he's ruined London. Andy Burnham I've got more time for. But they're not holding anyone to ransom. They're just saying, look, we'll close down if that's what you want, but we need to have our people compensated. Our people need, money. Our people need to be furloughed. Our people who are on the minimum wage, which most people are who work in bars, they need to be looked after. And it can't all be so London-centric or centralised with Boris. And particularly when you look at it, they have made massive mistakes. I want to see, Macron, a few weeks ago, he stood up and said, look, I've made some mistakes. I'm sorry. I'm now going to do this, that and the other. But, we've got a position here where Greater Manchester and Lancashire is set for Tier 3 lockdown. And that's 3.5 more million people who are going to be living under the Tier 3 rules. That's 17 million in total. We've almost got, in the UK at the moment, a national lockdown by default. Would it not be better to have it by design? That's my point. Got any more people?
It looks like emails or anything? No, I was going to say it looks like they're meeting the government with talks with the Manchester and London MPs this morning. That's Matt Hancock, of course,
but
involved.
They're doing it from a very aggressive point of view from both sides. What I'm trying to say is we need cooperation, especially when you see the other story. The NHS are paying outside consultants. We should Josh, you should try and get a job here. $7,000 a day to work on the so-called world-beating test and trace. And don't forget, a lot of this would have been relieved if we had got a proper test and trace system, as Hancock bragged we were going to get. We haven't got it. So that's one of the problems. What are the listeners saying?
I'll tell you what Judy's come through in La Nucia, I believe, on the Costa Blanca, about the difference between here and the UK. Brits probably not playing along. They're not scared of the police, whereas over here, you got your Guardia Civil on the streets, armed with sometimes semi-automatic weapons. I don't know if that makes any difference, but it's a good point to bring up.
It's a point that's been made a lot to me. That's why in Spain, at the first sign of trouble, when the coppers turn up, people know that has to stop. I'm not saying we want to have such a brutal police force in this country, although I do find it odd that the police in this country now, we saw a copper with a proper Bobby's hat on walking up Smith Street in Warwick the other day, and Lisa said, look at that, it's a copper with a hat on. Because nowadays they don't wear them, they wear this military style uniform, don't they, with the trousers tucked into the boots, and they've got some of them have got the tasers. it's a more aggressive look. My dad was a copper. The only thing he had was a truncheon. He had a proper truncheon pocket in his trousers, but they wore proper uniforms. I don't know. We seem to have a harder-looking police, but a softer police. And I'm not sure we want to get as hard in terms of physical as Spain, but I think Judy makes a brilliant point. If you get asked to jump in Spain, you ask how high, whereas in Britain, they go, who are you to tell me?
Yeah, you can't touch me.
You can't operate society like that, can you?
No, exactly. I'll tell you what, we'll put it out there. You can still contribute on this. We've got about 10 minutes left or so. 684 455 844. Yeah, the test and trace thing, you wanted to mention that. Yeah, that's public money once again going to consultants. It's not the first time this has happened, of course. They can just put in an invoice for whatever amount they want.
It could have been avoided again, couldn't it? Because Hancock turned down Apple and Google. He said, no, we don't want to do that. We're going to build our own world-beating one. They failed. It has failed. Every time, lads, when you go into a pub, they say, have you downloaded the NHS test and trace app? And so far, I've got to put my hands up again. Personal responsibility. I haven't. I've been worried about privacy. Although today I've decided I am going to download it because I do want to know if I've been somewhere where there's been an outbreak. But there's so much suspicion of government in this country. Many people are not doing it. I mean, I think 1 in 8 people, I was reading the other day, believe that all of this is a hoax. British people believe it's all a hoax. And Boris hasn't helped, and nor has Starmer now. We need politicians to come together on this issue. I mean, I don't mind arguing about Brexit. I'll argue till I'm blue in the face. And, of course, Brexit is a complete and utter mess, etc., etc. But this is more than politics. This is more than politics. But some people, for me just saying that, are saying, oh, John, you're wetting your pants, you're a snowflake. Yesterday I got accused of being, within 3 tweets, a Marxist, then a fascist, and then a complete and utter F moron.
That sounds like Twitter to me, yeah.
Pardon?
That sounds like Twitter to me, yeah, in a nutshell.
Yeah, that is Twitter. And I'd written 1,000 words article explaining my view and about kids getting compensated and kids coming back from university and why I think we need the lockdown. And it was a considered piece. Took me, a good few hours to write, and people just say, see you next Tuesday. No. And I can't believe how many people have got suckered into this now, where they just think there's no point in doing anything. No. Just let it rip, so to speak. And Boris didn't help, because Boris portrayed the decision as let it rip in Parliament, or a draconian lockdown. It's somewhere in between we need, and with us all pulling together. I know I sound dreadfully liberal, but I think that's the right approach.
And of course, people's opinions and everything influenced by social media now. It's happened in the last couple of recessions as well, where perhaps where recession depends on public confidence and things to come out of it, where it's going on longer because all the negative news is being spread and everyone's dopey opinions sometimes, they get taken as read.
To understand, a lot of the funding has gone to behavioural scientists and psychologists, and that they are being played. The public is being pushed to come to one conclusion or the other. So now the narrative is the lockdown didn't work. Well, it wasn't a lockdown, and it didn't work on one level, but it did work on another, because we didn't have 100,000 deaths, if you follow where I'm coming from. So we just need consistency, and people just need to be a bit more mature in their outlook. But then I would say that, wouldn't I? And as I say, hands up. And when I write a column or when I come on this radio show, I don't come on to be universally loved. I just tell you my truth. It's my truth. So it isn't necessarily the truth. It's my truth, my opinion. And I never say anything to court support. So yesterday, for example, on Twitter, loads of people said, oh, you're wrong on this one. Look, everybody's against you. Well, not everybody was, but the majority were on Twitter. But that's not a problem. I'm not going to write something or say something on here just for everyone to go, oh, go on tea for Prime Minister, because we're not going to get anywhere like that, are we? We need to debate, we need to discuss, and we need, as a country, to move forward. We are in a dreadful state, and it's not just our country. It's the whole of Europe, as Josh was describing, in Spain, and as I said, in France. Look at Ireland, the state of Ireland at the moment. We need to come together to defeat this invisible enemy.
John,
and we need to hold China to account as well.
Sure. Just in case you thought something was missing this morning, Gordon's here in Valencia on WhatsApp.
Oh, brilliant. I've been missing you, Gordon.
He left it till the last minute, but coming through with a suggestion, not blaming the kids at university, but blaming the parents. So haven't taught the kids responsibility. This is a whole other argument, I suppose, but consequences of actions and all of that, allowed their kids to do what they want without understanding their actions.
Well, I think, Gordon, you and I, put it in your diary, we're going to agree. It isn't just parents, it's the whole way we live now. Nobody understands the consequences of their actions. Nobody understands that cliche that I've been saying all morning, that no man is an island. You know, I disagree with Mrs. Thatcher on this one. She's misquoted on it when she said there's no such thing as society. Well, there should be such a thing as society. There should be such a thing as thinking about your fellow man. There should be such a thing as personal and collective responsibility. And Gordon, I would even say it's not just this generation, it's probably now 2 generations back as well, and a kind of laissez-faire, kind of uber liberal approach to the world, and I think that needs to change. Some people say that would change by a modern form of national service, not square bashing, but an idea like Kennedy said, here's another misquote, don't ask what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country, sort of philosophy of life. But that's all disappeared because everybody's just selfish. Everybody thinks they're so wonderful, and everybody thinks they're so wonderful, and we're so concerned about people's mental health and everything else. And then we go on Twitter, and I think you were alluding to this, Moody, and we just act like animals. In fact, that's disrespectful to animals, if you follow where I'm coming from.
It's a shame because Twitter was always held up as the, you know, that's the more sort of thoughtful, intelligent folk on Twitter rather than Facebook, you know, sharing dogs doing funny things. But it's just the way it's gone. The way it's gone, it's just, there's no argument. You're just right or wrong, and you're an idiot if you think this.
I just feel that has debased society. It's just debased society, and I think it's partly to do with the fact you've only got the 150 characters or whatever, but I find I have much more intelligent conversations, even though people who disagree with me, on Facebook than Twitter. If it wasn't for needing it for business, so to speak, I'd come off Twitter. I mean, the fact that people can hide behind anonymous accounts and just say the most horrendous things, it's just not on. And you can't really do that so much on Facebook. And I just think, you know, the whole idea of social media should have been a democratization of the world, you know, so you can be involved in politics, you know, you can have a say, but it hasn't. I mean, there's a classic example. There's this big row at the moment about Joe Biden and his son. Accusations about his son in the Ukraine, etc., etc. And this wasn't a Twitter, just a nobody. This was the New York Times, wrote 2 articles about him, put them up on Twitter, and Twitter have taken them down, effectively censored them. When you get Twitter also, even if you don't like Donald Trump, when you get Twitter stopping Donald Trump with certain tweets, we're in very dangerous territory. Let me tell you why, because nobody employed these people. These people have become the new Lord Chamberlain, so to speak, you know, who used to score out words in plays and in books, you know, and I just think it's a dangerous path. I think they've got too much power, and there's just too much abuse, and using the word abuse in every sense, and I don't think it makes our world better. Do you?
Well, it gives people the opportunity with saying stuff that they wouldn't say to your face. There's the issue, isn't it? You can come out with anything, throw anything at you, because you're not going to necessarily go around and talk to them in person. They're pretty safe there.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely, because, you know, that's like me. When I said in this article, when I wrote this article yesterday, and a lot of people haven't liked it, at least you know I wrote it. My name's on it, my picture's on it, and I stand by everything I've said. Although, when some people make constructive criticisms, you think, oh, maybe that's right. That's a little bit of a nuance I could have put in there. But you stand by what you wrote, right? That's what you do, and it's your name on it. And same on Twitter. I've got my business Twitter and I've got my personal Twitter. I don't have other Twitter accounts with false names on them so that I can then say, oh, that Josh, what an utter twit he is, or whatever. Don't do that. You should stand up by your opinions. Then you can have proper free speech, freedom of expression.
I mean, I've got quite a maybe different perspective on this, but I agree with you. And I think social media should become much more linked with a person's identity. And I think one of the problems with this pandemic is actually, in some respects, a lack of privacy. Because I think what we see here, you know, is you see a lot of statistics and news and journalists all, you know, we report the coronavirus, you know, daily updates, and we report the lockdown benchmarks and all of that kind of stuff. But we don't report names, faces, people who've died, grandparents who've passed away, somebody who went in for a hip operation and caught coronavirus and his children never saw them again. You know, these are the stories that will make people motivated to put a mask on. But instead, what we're trying to do to motivate those people is hit them with fines and hit them with figures. You know, we have to get back to really good storytelling. But the problem is, it's all under GPDR regulation here in Spain. So the hospitals won't tell us who's where and what's happening, you know. And I think that's something that we need to work on.
The one F you missed out there when you were talking about fines and everything else, it's also fear. The government from day one of this pandemic, I don't know about Spain, but here they decided to have Operation Fear, and like in Spinal Tap, they turned the amplifier up to 11, and so everyone got scared stiff. That's why we complied to a large extent with the first lockdown. Now people are much more cynical, and I think you're so right, Josh. If you hear the story of that was a brilliant example that you just said. You go in for a hip operation or any operation,
happened in Madrid,
and you never ever come out. That's a real story. That brings it home to people, and that isn't instilling fear. That's just saying, well, that could have been my dad, my mum, my granddad. And that's really what I'm trying to say to people today in this whole broadcast. Look, it's collective and personal responsibility. You made a brilliant point, Josh, a brilliant point.
I guess the problem with this is it's, you know, the younger people feel, I know we're not bringing it back to them again, but kind of feeling indestructible with this because it's not something, it's not getting hit by a bus. It may not even affect you. So you don't
forget, there's this long COVID thing.
Yeah.
I think the government attitude has changed because I think they're beginning to, I think it's two things. I think they're thinking more about China, number one. And number two, I think this long COVID has scared the hell out of them because they're seeing these young people partying and they're now saying, is there long-term effects? You know, in 20 years' time, if you were dancing on that roof in Granada or in Valencia, wherever it was, are you going to have a long-term effect? That's what they're beginning to worry about. And you're right, when you're young, when you're at university, I mean, I think up until about the age of 35. I used to say you don't mature until you've got your own dustbin. I know that's different in Spain. But until you got your own dustbin and you're paying the council tax, you're not really matured. And you think you're invincible. Nothing's fallen off. Nothing's drooped. Or you've got all your own teeth. Everything's fine. And then suddenly you hit this wall and you realise you're not indestructible. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to get young people scared to stiff and not be adventurous and not do all the things that we all could do when we were younger. I want them to have that experience. But that's just the stark reality. You don't think anything's ever going to go wrong, do you?
No, exactly. Yeah, and it's kind of, I suppose, it's sort of like smoking in a way because it doesn't instantly kill you. You feel like it's not a problem. You know, I can handle this. But it's the spreading it to the vulnerable, of course, which is the big issue.
And by spreading fear, and the thing that Josh said earlier, just going on the fear, just going on the fines, that's no solution because
it doesn't empower you. Let's face it,
that gym owner in Liverpool, you can fine him. You could have a 60 grand fine in Spain. But they ain't going to get paid, are they, long term? And that's the problem. So that won't work. We've got to persuade, show people the science, and cajole people to go down this route. And that's really what I'm saying. Let's have a draconian lockdown. Let's do it properly this time. Let's hope that suppresses it till we get this test and trace. Even me, I'm going to now participate in test and trace, even though I don't like the idea really. I'm going to do it because I feel I'm not scared for me personally, although I should be because I'm in the risk groups. I'm just saying we've got to stop this. I want my two children to have the life that I had, and I want them to have children and their children to have the life you should have, which is dancing on the roof at Granada University, isn't it? That's part of what life is.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it feels like we've just covered the sort of one subject there, but there was plenty of interlinked bits that are going on in the news at the moment. I did actually, that was good. But I was going to start this morning by giving you the opportunity to wish Prince Christian of Denmark a happy 15th birthday. As an England football fan, you'll wish him all the best for today, right? What? We haven't got time to go into this now.
I've lost all interest in international football, and I've basically lost interest in domestic football. And the coup that was attempted this last 10 days, you know, Liverpool and Manchester United, I think it's disgusting. Grassroots football needs the money. And also, I don't know whether football's ever going to come back because you watch it on the telly and I turn it off because you got that soundtrack and it's just rubbish. It's just rubbish. And of course, some footballers have let themselves down, with the notable exception of people like Marcus Rashford, who I think deserves his honour, and I think that he's leading by example. What a great guy that guy is, 21 years old. What a great guy. But then other footballers getting women into their hotels, breaking the curfew, etc., they're kind of rubbing our noses in it, if you follow what I'm saying. And I don't like it, and so I'm kind of not interested. But I wish the young man a very happy birthday, and by all accounts Denmark deserved to win, didn't they?
Well, I would have thought so by the sounds of it. I didn't sit and watch that either, but I tell you what, I have to say I'm happy for Scotland's winning streak recently. These Euro,
that's quite nice, isn't it?
These Euro tournaments and World Cups are way better with Scotland in there. The
problem is, people like Gordon will get carried away now, and they'll think they will beat us. I mean, I can never forget Ali, what's his name? We're on the march with Ali's army, where they went off and they thought they were going to win the World Cup, but they'd already booked their tickets for the EasyJet flight home. I love the passion of the Scottish.
Great.
I love their belief.
Yeah.
But, and it's great that they're winning. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy for them. But please, Gordon, don't start telling us you're the new Brazil. I'm not talking about Alan Brazil. I'm talking about the country. I'm talking about the country.